Willow Creek wasn't the kind of place where things changed quickly. The town had one gas station, one high school, and a corner diner that still used paper menus. Most mornings were quiet, just the buzz of cicadas, the whistle of the 6:15 freight train, and the occasional bark from a backyard dog. But that morning, everything changed in an instant. At precisely 7:43 a.m., a loud wail broke the silence. Sirens, not the kind that signal a drill or a parade, but the urgent, bone-deep kind that made people stop in their tracks. An ambulance tore down Maple Avenue, lights spinning, engine roaring, weaving past the pickup trucks that had just started pulling out of driveways. Inside that ambulance was Harold Benton. Harold, 82 years old and a retired school bus driver, had collapsed alone in his living room only minutes before. His neighbor, a high school senior named Derek, had heard the crash and found him barely breathing, slumped between the coffee table and the couch. The 911 dispatcher told Derek to stay calm and keep Harold's airway open. Help was on the way. As the paramedics loaded Harold into the back of the ambulance, they had no idea someone else was watching. Someone with 4 legs, a golden coat, and eyes that never left Harold's side. Max was Harold's golden retriever. And for nearly 12 years, he'd been more than just a pet. After Harold lost his wife, Max had filled the house with a kind of quiet companionship. They took their walks at the same time every morning. Harold talked to him like a person, and Max listened better than most people did. The moment the ambulance sped away, Max exploded through the half-open gate in the front yard like a bullet. No barking, no hesitation, just movement pure and focused. A teenager at the corner bus stop watched, wide-eyed, as the golden blur streaked past. Was that dog chasing the ambulance? He asked, voice caught between awe and confusion. It was. Max was running with everything he had, legs pumping hard, ears pinned back against the wind. The pavement was hot, the air heavy with humidity, but Max didn't stop. He ignored horns, bikes, and curious glances. All he saw were the red and white flashing lights ahead of him. He turned when the ambulance turned. He crossed intersections, barely avoiding traffic. He squeezed through alleyways and splashed through puddles. More than once, someone tried to grab him or call him over, but Max didn't look back. To the people watching, it was surreal, a dog chasing an ambulance like it was his job. But to Max, it wasn't surreal. It was simple. His person was in that box, and wherever that box was going, he was going too. 15 kilometers. That's how far the ambulance traveled, weaving from residential roads to county highways and into the city where St. Luke's Regional Hospital stood. 15 kilometers of relentless sprinting from a dog who had never run more than a few blocks in his life. By the time the ambulance pulled into the emergency bay, the EMTs were already inside. With Harold, the vehicle's back doors slammed shut. The garage doors rolled down. Max made it only seconds later. The security camera caught it all, the final turn into the hospital parking lot. Max skidding around the corner and then collapsing just meters. From the bay entrance, his chest heaved, his paws bled, his body trembled from heat and strain. But even then, Max tried to lift his head, nose twitching toward the scent of the one person he trusted most in the world. A nurse walking past stopped. Mid-step, "Someone call animal control?" She called out, concerned. "There's a dog out here, and he looks like he's in trouble." That was the beginning. None of them knew it yet, but this dog had just changed everything. The emergency bay at St. Luke's Regional Hospital was designed for chaos. Sirens, stretchers, rapid voices, and the occasional helicopter. Nothing surprised the staff anymore. But the sight of a golden retriever collapsing just outside the sliding doors? That was new. Nurse Jamie Owens, on a break between patients, was the first to reach him. She knelt beside the heaving dog, brushing her hand along his back. His fur was soaked with sweat, and his paw pads were raw, speckled with blood. He had no collar, no leash, just a red bandana barely hanging on. His breathing was shallow, fast. "Hey, hey. Easy, boy," Jamie whispered. "Where did you come from?" A few other staff stepped outside. Some assumed he'd been hit by a car or dumped nearby. But then a security guard, Stan, stepped forward, frowning as he held up his radio. "This might sound insane," he said slowly, "but this dog's been chasing the ambulance from Willow Creek." "You're joking," Jamie replied, eyes wide. "I'm not. Just got a call from dispatch." A few people on the route reported a dog sprinting after the ambulance the entire way. One guy even tried to stop him near Route 6, but the dog kept going. Jamie looked back at the animal in disbelief. 15 kilometers? Are you serious?" Stan nodded, then pointed to the security camera over the bay entrance. "You'll see it. Puss." He came in at full speed, like he knew where he was going. Jamie's gaze returned to the collapsed dog. There was something desperate in him, something raw and pure. She didn't need to be told twice. This wasn't just any stray. He was chasing someone. She gently ran her fingers along his ribs. He flinched, but didn't move away. "We need to get him inside," she said. One of the E-techs brought out a rolling gurney. It wasn't meant for dogs, but they made it work, lifting the retriever slowly and wheeling him inside through the staff entrance. The hospital didn't have a veterinary unit, but an on-call doctor with a soft spot for animals. Dr. Patel took over. He cleaned the dog's paws, hooked up fluids, and checked his vitals. They gave him a quiet corner of the recovery room, laying him on a thick towel with a portable fan, blowing cool air. It didn't take long for Jamie to connect the dots. She pulled Harold Benton's intake form from the system and scanned it. At the bottom, under living situation, someone had scrawled, "Lives alone. Has dog, golden retriever. Name, Max." She looked up sharply. "Oh my God," she murmured. The dog stirred faintly at the mention of his name. His tail gave a slight, almost imperceptible wag. Jamie's heart clenched. "You're Max, aren't you?" She sat down beside him, showing him the form. "That ambulance, it was Harold's. You followed him here, all this way." Max let out a low whimper, more vibration than sound. Word spread fast. Staff crowded the hallway near the recovery room, whispering and peeking in. Nurses who'd been dealing with trauma all morning were now teary-eyed, shaking their heads. 15 kilometers, one muttered. "I don't even drive that far without complaining." Dr. Patel stepped out a few minutes later. "He's stable for now," he said. "Dehydrated, blistered, overheated, but the heart strong. Damned miracle." Jamie glanced down the hallway toward the ICU, where Harold was still unconscious. "We need to get him to Harold," she said quietly. "Rules don't exactly allow for dogs in the ICU," Dr. Patel replied. Jamie's face was firm. "Then bend them." He studied her for a moment and nodded. "Let me make some calls." Meanwhile, Max, barely able to lift his head, kept his eyes toward the hallway, as if he knew that somewhere down there, his best friend was fighting to survive. And in his own way, Max was fighting to not to run anymore, but simply to stay. The ICU at St. Luke's didn't see many exceptions to policy. It was sterile, tightly managed, and governed by protocols built from decades of liability concerns. But every once in a while, something or someone came along to challenge that. This time, it was Max. Dr. Patel had done more than make calls. He'd pulled strings. By noon, the hospital director had been briefed. The story of the golden retriever who had chased an ambulance for 15 kilometers to be with his owner had already begun to ripple through the staff. By 1 p.m., Max was cleared to be wheeled gently into Harold Benton's ICU room. Jamie was the one who brought him in. Max was still weak. He'd been bathed, his paws cleaned and bandaged, and 4 drip was taped to his front leg, pumping in fluids. But even groggy, the moment he was wheeled past the ICU's glass doors, his head lifted, his nose twitched. He could smell him. Harold. Room 3B was quiet, lit by soft daylight and the steady beep of monitors. Harold lay still, pale and fragile, the rise and fall of his chest almost imperceptible. Jamie hesitated at the doorway. "We're not even sure he can hear anything," she told Max softly. "But maybe he can feel something." She lowered the gurney and helped Max slide gently off it. The moment his paws hit the floor, his legs trembled, but he moved, slow, wobbly, determined. 1 step. Then 2. Max reached the side of Harold's bed and laid his head on the mattress with a soft sigh. He closed his eyes. Nothing happened. For a long moment, the only sounds in the room were the heart monitor and the quiet hum of machines. Then something changed. Harold's hand twitched. It was small, barely noticeable, but Jamie saw it. Her eyes flicked to the monitor. His pulse, which had been low and irregular, suddenly rose in a steady rhythm. His eyelids fluttered. She stepped closer. "Mr. Benton?" she said carefully. "Harold, can you hear me?" His eyes opened, glazed. At first, then focused. He didn't speak, but his gaze moved slowly to the golden blur at his side. His lips parted. A faint breath escaped. Then another word. "Max," Jamie gasped. She grabbed the call button. Max let out a soft, low whine and nuzzled his muzzle into Harold's hand. Harold, with trembling fingers, moved just enough to stroke his fur. Tears filled Jamie's eyes. "I think he just brought you back." Within minutes, the ICU was alive with movement. Doctors came running. Nurses followed. They checked the monitors, ran new scans. The attending physician whispered, "Whatever just happened, that dog sparked it." It wasn't medical science. It wasn't adrenaline. It was something else, something no machine could quantify. Connection. Max stayed curled beside the bed for hours. A nurse brought in a blanket. Another brought water. No one asked him to leave. He didn't bark, didn't fuss. He just stayed, eyes closed, heart steady, like he finally believed Harold was safe enough to rest. Outside, staff shared the story across departments. Down in the cafeteria, a pair of interns pulled up the security footage of Max collapsing. Outside the emergency bay, one nurse posted a photo online, Max lying beside Harold, their hands touching. It spread faster than wildfire. Back in room 3B, Harold finally spoke more clearly. "He was always smart," he told Jamie, voice raspy. "He knew when my wife was sick, used to curl up next to her oxygen tank. I swear he knew before the doctors did." Jamie smiled, wiping away a tear. "Well, he found you again." 15 kilometers, on foot. Harold chuckled, then winced. "Old fool," he murmured fondly. "Both of us." Jamie knelt down to Max and scratched behind his ear. "You're something else," she whispered. But Max didn't lift his head. He stayed where he was, quiet, calm, and finally, for the first time in hours, still. He had made it. Asterisk, by the next morning, room 3B was no longer just a hospital room. It had become something else entirely. A quiet shrine to loyalty. A symbol of something deeper than even medicine could explain. Max had stayed the entire night by Harold's side, though his the 4th bag was swapped out once during the night, and his paw bandages were rewrapped. Max hadn't moved from the edge of the bed except when Harold briefly drifted into another wave of unconsciousness. Each time Harold stirred or coughed, Max's head would lift. His ears would perk slightly, like a guardian always on duty. At 6:30 a.m., Nurse Jamie returned with a tray of toast and scrambled eggs. She brought an extra boiled egg for Max, against every regulation. "He's more than a visitor," she told Dr. Patel, who gave her a tired smile and said nothing. Across the hospital, screens in waiting rooms and nurses' lounges buzzed with a familiar image. Max lying beside Harold, their forms bathed in warm window light. The story had gone viral overnight. Local news channels aired the footage first, then national outlets picked it up. Dog chases ambulance 15 kilometers to stay with his owner, collapses from exhaustion, but refuses to leave. Twitter exploded. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Max the hero. #Run2Love. Hashtag Guardian Dog People shared stories of their own pets, their own heartbreaks, and loyalties. But nothing matched Max's story, because Max had done what no one else could. He had run tirelessly, through danger and pain, just to be with the person who needed him most. By noon, the hospital had received over 300 calls asking about Max and Harold. Some wanted to donate money for Max's care. Others simply asked for updates. A few volunteers even offered to adopt Max, in case Harold didn't pull through. But Harold was pulling through. Slowly, but clearly. The doctors couldn't explain it. They expected the worst: partial paralysis, extended coma, severe cardiac complications. But each hour seemed to defy those expectations. His vitals improved, his speech returned. He responded to voices, recognized faces. Every time they checked on him, Max was still there, calm, faithful, anchored like a heartbeat at Harold's side. "What do you think did it?" Dr. Patel asked Jamie during a break. She thought for a moment. "I think Max never left him. Not even when everyone else did. I think that mattered." In room 3B, Harold was sitting upright for the first time in 2 days. His bed raised just enough so he could look directly at Max. "You're a lunatic," Harold muttered with a chuckle, rubbing the golden retriever's head. "What were you thinking, chasing an ambulance?" Max blinked slowly, tail wagging once. Jamie stepped inside with a clipboard. "Vitals are good. Oxygen holding. We might be talking about stepping down from ICU in a day or two." Harold grinned. "Only if he comes with me." She smiled back. "I think that's up to Max." Outside the hospital, reporters had gathered. The story had outgrown the hospital, outgrown Willow Creek. It had become something larger, a reminder, in a world full of rush and distance, that love still ran that deep. As Harold napped, Jamie stepped out for air. A woman with tear-streaked cheeks approached her, holding her phone. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the nurse in the video?" Jamie blinked. I guess I am." "My son's autistic," the woman said softly, nonverbal. "But he watched that clip of Max, and he said his first word in months." Jamie covered her mouth. "He said dog," the woman smiled. "And then he cried." Back upstairs, Max had shifted in his sleep and curled tighter against Harold's side. The machines beeped steadily. They were healing. Together. And the world was watching. 3 days after arriving at St. Luke's, Harold Benton was wheeled out of the ICU, with Max trotting slowly beside him, bandaged paws, 4 removed, fur still thin around the places where they'd shaved to run tests. But his tail wagged, and that was all Harold needed. "Feels like I'm walking out of prison," Harold said to Jamie, who was escorting them to the recovery wing. "Except this time, I got a dog guarding me instead of a parole officer." Jamie laughed. "He's the most loyal bodyguard we've got on staff." Max's name now appeared on a whiteboard outside Harold's new room. Patient, Harold Benton, approved. Companion, Max, therapy exception granted. It wasn't hospital policy. But then again, nothing about Max had been ordinary. Dr. Patel stopped by during the move. You'll be glad to know your dog's vitals are perfect now. No fever. Hydration normal. Paw pads healing. Harold scratched Max under the chin. He's always been tougher than me. People don't realize, Patel sighed thoughtfully. When you live alone for so long, the dog doesn't just become a pet. He becomes the pulse of your house. Harold's eyes dimmed. After Martha passed, Max kept me going. I never had to talk to myself. He was always listening. That night, under dim lights and fresh sheets, Harold looked over at Max, curled beside the bed, breathing slow and deep. The hospital had brought in a cushioned mat just for him. He hadn't made a single noise during the transfer. He hadn't needed to. For the first time in years, Harold talked about things he never told anyone. About the silence that echoed in the house after his wife died. About how some mornings he didn't even bother to get dressed. About how Max would nudge his arm every day at 7 a.m. for their walk, even when Harold wanted to give up. And he listened, too. Max just listened. The next morning brought a knock on the door. Jamie stepped in, followed by a man in a polo shirt with a press badge. Sorry to interrupt, Jamie said. This is Kevin Marks from Channel 9 News. He's doing a segment on Max, only if you're comfortable. Harold hesitated, glancing at Max. Kevin stepped forward. Mr. Benton, I promise this isn't just a fluff piece. People around the country are talking about your dog. We've had calls from Germany, Brazil, Japan. They're calling Max the marathon dog. His story's inspiring people. Harold looked down at Max, then back up. All right, but only if Max gets to be on camera more than me. The segment was filmed right there in the room. They rolled in a simple setup, a tripod, a soft light, and Kevin's questions. Mr. Benton, what was the first thing you thought when you saw Max by your bed? I thought I was dreaming, Harold answered honestly. But then I felt his fur, and it was real. That crazy mutt actually followed me. Why do you think he did it? Harold paused. Because he doesn't know how not to love. The video aired that night. The reaction was instant. Thousands of comments poured in. Children sent drawings of Max. Veterans shared stories of their service dogs and how they saved them from loneliness. An animal shelter started a Run Like Max donation campaign to raise money for dogs in need. But it wasn't the attention that mattered to Harold. It was what Max reminded him of, that even in the loneliest corners of life, something as pure as a dog's love could pierce the dark. That night, with the TV muted and the room quiet, Harold whispered, You saved me, Max. Not just now. Not just this week. You've been saving me since the day I brought you home. Max opened one eye, let out a small huff, and nudged Harold's hand with his nose. No applause. No cameras. Just them. Together. Still healing. Asterisk. The ripple Max had started didn't stop at the hospital's sliding doors. By the end of the week, his story was being shared in classrooms, therapy centers, military support groups, and elderly homes. Across the country, people began referring to Max as the dog that wouldn't give up, a symbol of devotion in a world often too distracted to notice what loyalty really looked like. One particular email stood out to Jamie. It came from a Chimmy, trauma counselor in Missouri. We've begun showing your patient's story, Max's story, to veterans in our PTSD recovery group. One of our clients, who hadn't spoken in 4 months, said, That dog knew his purpose. Maybe I can find mine too. Thank you for letting the world see what love looks like when it doesn't quit. Jamie forwarded the message to Harold, who read it 3 times, his hands trembling. I never thought we'd matter this much to strangers, he said softly. You already mattered, Jamie replied. The world just finally caught a glimpse of it. Harold's recovery continued better than anyone expected. The cardiac team kept shaking their heads in amazement. His vitals were strong, his mind sharp, and every time a nurse entered, they found Max alert and watchful, as though he were checking credentials. By now, Max had a hospital ID badge clipped to a custom-made red vest. Max Benton Honorary Therapy Dog Street, Luke's Regional Access, all patient rooms, IQ with EXCEPTIONS. It had started as a joke. Then HR made it official. Everywhere Max walked, patients smiled. One boy with leukemia got out of bed just to pet him. A woman battling dementia called Max by her late husband's name, and for the first time in months, she smiled and laughed. Even staff morale improved. Nurses who hadn't taken a real break in weeks found themselves sneaking into room 214 just to sit with Max for 5 minutes. He's doing more healing than half our equipment, one nurse joked. One afternoon, a young man showed up at the hospital front desk with nothing but a duffel bag and a trembling black lab on a leash. I don't have anywhere to go, he said. I saw that story about Max. I got discharged from the army last month. I've been sleeping in my truck with Juno. I thought, I don't know. Maybe someone here would understand. Jamie was called down. She knelt beside the man, asked him his name, Derek, and offered him a seat. She gave Juno a bowl of water and called a local veteran housing organization that partnered with the hospital. Within an hour, Derek had a temporary shelter placement and an offer to help train Juno as a service animal. All because Max had reminded people what connection could look like. Harold, now walking short distances with a cane, watched all this unfold from the hallway window near his room. They keep calling him a hero, he murmured. But Max doesn't even know what that word means. He just loves. Jamie stood beside him. Maybe that's the point. He didn't do it for attention. He did it because it was you. That kind of loyalty doesn't ask why. Outside, dusk spread gold and orange across the parking lot. Reporters still waited now and then for a new glimpse of Max, but Harold had asked for peace. The hospital respected that. A quiet knock came at the door. A girl, no older than 8, stood in the doorway holding a hand-drawn card. For the dog, she whispered, the one who chased the ambulance. She handed it to Harold. On the front was a crayon drawing of Max with a red cape and a heart over his chest. To Max, because you didn't stop running. Now my dad said he'll stop running away too. Harold's eyes welled up. Max padded over, leaned into his side, and sighed. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. It was nearing the end of Harold's second week in the hospital when the doctors finally gave the green light for discharge. His body was healing, his heart stronger, and his spirit, once brittle and resigned, now carried a flicker of hope. But the question everyone quietly asked, what about Max? The hospital had made exceptions for Max during Harold's stay, but once outside, life wouldn't be so easy. Jamie sat with Harold one afternoon in the recovery wing. Paperwork spread across the table. We'll write a note for your landlord, Jamie said gently. They usually don't allow pets, but with Max's role as a therapy dog, maybe it'll help. Harold nodded, though worry shadowed his face. Martha was the one who handled all that. I'm not good with the paperwork. Or the fighting. Jamie smiled, squeezing his hand. You're not alone. Outside the hospital, the world had fallen a little in love with Max's story, but few understood the practical challenges behind it. Harold's apartment was small, and on the second floor, no elevator. The walk for Max, who had just recovered from exhaustion and minor injuries, would have to be slow and cautious. Yet, every morning, Max waited patiently by the door, ready to lead the way. Their first walk outside since the ambulance chase was quiet. The streets smelled different cars, food vendors, City noise and Max sniffed every corner, tail wagging slowly. A neighbor watched from across the street and called out, "Hey, isn't that the hospital dog?" Harold smiled. The one and only. But as weeks passed, new struggles surfaced. Harold's heart wasn't as resilient as it seemed. His energy fluctuated wildly, and bouts of fatigue hit without warning. One evening, he collapsed while trying to climb the stairs. Max barked loudly, alerting a neighbor who called for help. Harold was rushed back to the hospital. Jamie was there in minutes, her face pale but steady. "This is the reality," she said softly to Harold's daughter, who had flown in from another state. Recovery isn't a straight line. Yet, even in the hospital halls filled with machines and urgency, Max stayed calm. He lay beside Harold's bed, head resting gently on the floor, refusing to leave. Doctors adjusted medications, monitored his heart, but all agreed the emotional bond between the two was crucial. Max was more than a dog. Now he was a lifeline. One afternoon, Jamie found Harold watching a video on his phone. It was the original footage of Max chasing the ambulance. "I watch this when I'm scared," Harold confessed. "It reminds me that if he can push through pain and exhaustion, maybe I can too." Jamie nodded. "You're not alone in this fight. And you have Max." Outside the hospital, the public's fascination with Max hadn't dimmed. A local publisher approached Harold with an offer to write a book about their story. Harold hesitated, but agreed, knowing it could help others. "It's not just about me or Max," he said during the first interview. "It's about all the people who feel forgotten, the ones who need something to hold on to." Max, of course, was the co-author of that unspoken message. Weeks turned into months. Harold's health stabilized. His daughter stayed on to help. Max thrived on routine and attention, often joining therapy sessions and community visits. Together, they became a symbol of resilience, not because of some miraculous cure, but because of the simple, stubborn refusal to give up. Months had passed since Max's heroic chase and Harold's near-fatal collapse. The world had witnessed their incredible journey, celebrated the bond between man and dog, and marveled at the unwavering loyalty that had saved a life. But for the medical team at St. Luke's Regional, one question lingered like a shadow. They hadn't yet fully understood. What exactly was it that Max carried inside him that had so stunned the doctors? When Max first arrived at the hospital, exhausted and near collapse, the veterinary team consulted at the insistence of Dr. Patel had run a battery of tests. It was routine at first, but then the unexpected surfaced. Inside Max's bloodstream, they found traces of a rare compound, a natural, powerful anti-inflammatory substance previously only identified. Experimental drugs. Max's own body was producing it. Could it be that his relentless energy and his ability to sustain such an extreme effort were partly due to a unique biological gift? Was Max's recovery and endurance fueled by something intrinsic, something almost miraculous? Dr. Patel and the veterinary specialists dove deeper. They took tissue samples, ran DNA tests, and collaborated with researchers from nearby universities. The results revealed something astounding. Max had a rare genetic mutation that allowed his body to produce unusually high levels of a naturally occurring enzyme, one known to accelerate healing and reduce inflammation far beyond normal canine limits. "It's not just a dog's loyalty," Dr. Patel explained during a press conference, arranged after months of research. Max's biology gave him the strength to push past exhaustion and heal rapidly. But even more remarkable was his spirit, his instinct to keep running, to stay by his owner's side. This discovery opened new doors in veterinary medicine and potentially human medicine. Scientists believed that understanding Max's enzyme could lead to breakthroughs in treating injuries, inflammation, and possibly heart disease. For Harold, The news was humbling. He sat with Max on a quiet afternoon in their small backyard. Sunlight filtering through the leaves. "You're a wonder, Max," Harold said, gently stroking his golden fur. "Not just for what you did for me that day, but for what you might mean for others too." Max rested his head on Harold's knee. Eyes soft and steady. The world's fascination with Max transformed into something more profound. He was no longer just a viral sensation or a loyal companion. He was a symbol of hope, an emblem of how love and nature combined could defy expectations. Harold's recovery continued steadily, with Max by his side through every step. Together, they made appearances at hospitals, schools, and community centers, encouraging others facing hardship to keep moving forward. No matter how hard the journey got. In one such visit, Harold said to a room full of patients, "Sometimes, the ones who save us aren't the people we expect. Sometimes it's the ones who chase us down the street, who never give up, even when they're tired and scared." Max sat quietly beside him, tail wagging softly. Their story became a reminder that healing comes in many forms, some seen, some unseen, and that sometimes the greatest miracles walk on four legs, with hearts as big as the sky.